So our topic, as you remember, hopefully, and as you will now find out, is what does work constitute? What does it mean to work psychologically? And we said that in general there's 11 categories of work. And the way that Rabbi Ginsburgh explained it is that each one of them, the way he usually does, each one of them corresponds to one of the sefirot. Okay, one of the 11 emanations, if you want, or however you want to call it. So last week we talked about the crown, what it means to work in the crown. And the work in the crown is to develop a sense of mystery about life, right? That a person should have yearning, we'll see more of that today, to discover things. Because the crown is about that which is unknown, right? The crown is the superconsciousness, that's what we call it. And the superconsciousness is something that I'm not aware of. So if I don't have a yearning in my life to discover things that are not in my awareness, they're not part of my schema of life, then that means that my crown is not active. And the crown has to be active, like everything. It's sort of like if you go to what do you call them? The bone doctors. I forgot. No, the orthopedic. So if you go to one of them, and if he's good, if he's not good, he's going to tell you to get an operation. But if he's good, he understands that the body is best at healing itself. And how do you get the body to heal something? You have to use it. If you don't use it, the body doesn't know that anything's going on. It's sort of like all the mechanisms in the world, if they're not in use, they fall into disrepair. So that same thing is true about the sefirot, it's true about the different parts of the psyche. That you have to get to a point where it's active enough, and if it's active enough, it functions. It'll find a way to work. So psychological work in terms of the crown is having an air of curiosity, of interest, and most importantly, and that's what we said last week, it's finding Hashem in everything. It's to understand Hashem is hiding behind the facade that I'm seeing. And if I'm not looking for Hashem, that means my crown is inactive. Okay, so that's in short what we did last week. And this week, hopefully, we will finish 3 of them. So let's continue with wisdom. And wisdom is very interesting. So first of all, even if we wouldn't say anything, the whole idea here is to find a verse that contains the word work, or toil, or service, la'avod, and is related to that sefirah. So the verse in crown, remember, is Ve'avad Levi hu et avodat oel moed. And the Levi shall serve he the service of the tabernacle. And so we said the word he there was unnecessary. And that's how we got to the whole explanation of the crown, because the he here is not referring to the Levi according to Chassidus, it's referring to the crown. He's referring to serving Hashem. Ve'avad Levi who there is, he's serving Hashem. Okay. We'll see the Levi again later, because obviously a big deal in the Torah is Avodat Mikdash, right? Everything that has to do with Avodah is related this or that way to is at the end of Parshas Mishpatim, and it's actually 2 verses. We won't say the first verse right now, we'll leave it for later. The second and third verses are Ve'avadatem et Hashem Elokeichem וَيِרַח את לחמך ואת מימיך, והסירות עם מחלה מקרבך. לא תהיה משקלה ועקרה בארצך את מספר ימיך המלא. Which means, you shall serve Hashem your God, and He will bless your bread and your water, and He will remove illness from amongst you, from inside you, really, literally. מקרבך. There will not be infertility, and there will not be miscarriages in your land. And I will fill the number of your days. So it's a very interesting verse. It starts off with, you shall serve Hashem your God, which is a general blanket statement. What exactly does it mean? But the moment that you do this service, whatever it is, this work, then there's all these blessings that come after it. Okay? So Yafa also is here. She's not coming, I guess.
Okay.
She just
I
joined.
missed the phrase.
And
I missed the sentence.
I guess I don't know who YOG is, but Pnina Gorelik with a G.
Nina Miriam just called to ask for the code. So
Maybe it's her. Okay. So welcome everybody who's just joined.
Yisrael Ori.
Oh, it's her husband. Yeah, right. Okay, I'm muting you guys because it makes a lot of noise. So what is this service? So the Rambam says very interestingly, based on the sages, that this service is about prayer. That's what it's talking about. It's a very interesting thing to say, "Va'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem," that you shall serve Hashem, is prayer. But the explanation that the sages say is that this has to do with service of the heart, it's called. And, oh, hi. We were wondering where you were.
Yeah. We just started. Thanks.
So, it's referring to prayer, but surprisingly, this is not going to be about prayer per se. I mean, if you would think about it and say, okay, this verse is about prayer, so this verse must connect to something that has to do with prayer, it doesn't exactly fit with wisdom. Wisdom is not usually about prayer. You think about it. There's another thing that the sages say. They say, "Va'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem." There's one place that they say, "Va'avadetem betorato," that you serve Him by learning His Torah. Okay? So that would fit with wisdom pretty well. But that's still not exactly what we're looking for. So to understand exactly what we're looking for, we have to take the verse before. What's the verse before? The verse before this says, see if I can find it. Okay. Lo tishtachave, Va'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem. The verse before is Lo tishtachave leElokehem ve'lo ta'avdem ve'lo ta'aseh kema'asehem ki haaretz te'arsem ve'shaber teshaber matzevotehem ve'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem. The verse before says, you shall not serve all the gods in the land that you're coming to. And not only shall you not serve them, but you can't do what those nations that are in the land do. And in fact, you have to destroy their monuments. Monuments are what they used for, usually as altars. So there's two parts to it. On the one hand is to, first of all, sur mera, first of all, not to do the wrong thing, not to serve the wrong way, and then to serve the right way. So what is it? What is this in the psyche? What is there such a thing that you have to destroy something? Mamish, to destroy something. It's talking about destroying a monument. And then you have to serve in the right way. So, and if you remember that wisdom, the inner experience of wisdom is bittul, is nullification. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the self-worship. Really, because you see that all the blessings afterward are very personal. I will fill all your days. You won't be infertile. You won't miscarry. All these things can be understood physically, but they can also be understood spiritually. What does it mean to be infertile? That the person is not creative, that all their creative powers are gone. That's very fitting for wisdom, because wisdom is always ha-chokhmah me'ayin timatzeh, that wisdom is found from nothingness. It's the first glimmer of knowledge that comes into the person. It's like, remember, we've talked about this many times. Whenever the superconsciousness, which is the source of all our talents, is activated, it's activated through self-nullification, through bittul. And the first place that it shines on is what we call the intellect of wisdom, the ma'ach chokhmah. That's why men have two sets of tefillin, right? It was unknown for a long time, what is this? Until the Arizal explained that the regular tefillin, the Rashi tefillin, that is the mochin de ima. That's the mind of the mother principle of the person. What's the mother principle? It's nurturing, it's sustaining. So that's why it's the basic type of tefillin. Everybody has one set. Everybody has Rashi. The Rashi tefillin are like that you sustain your spiritual state. They give you the mind state to sustain who you are, religiously, intellectually, whatever it is. But then there's another set called Rabbeinu Tam, okay, which is in the order that they are in the Torah, he puts the parshas that start Vehaya in the middle. Really, that means switch Aim Shema and then Shema. So they're very similar, just the order is a little bit different. And then the Arizal came and revealed that this is the mindset of the father principle. The father principle is Chokhmah, is wisdom. It's the same thing. So what does that do? That sort of jumpstarts your creativity. Okay? When a person is learning not just the revealed tradition of Torah, but he's also learning the inner tradition of Torah, there has to be more creativity. Because it takes a lot more to understand the symbolism. Because what are you looking for? You're always looking for what does it mean? In the regular learning of Torah, all you need to do is make sure that it's logical. And on a certain level, it's very easy, and on a certain level, it's very hard, because there's a lot to consider, and there's a lot to juggle at the same time until you get something that makes sense to you. But when you're understanding the symbolism behind things, you have to be creative. You have to look at things like an artist would look at things. Okay? An artist tries to symbolize things through his art. And so you have to do the reverse process. Like we're doing in this verse. To serve Hashem here means that I'm destroying the self-worship. I'm destroying the altar that I created for myself. And instead of that, I'm building an altar for Hashem. And did anybody watch the class last night?
No.
We talked about Hagar.
Did you put it on the...
Yeah. Well, it's not. I'm going to put it on Patreon also, but you're not. You're having trouble on Patreon.
I'm going to quit that, but
Okay.
But
So I'll put it on the WhatsApp then.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So Hagar is a very interesting character. She's a very special woman. She leaves Egypt. She leaves the palace. She wants to be with Abraham and Sarah, and she ends up, with things that maybe she never imagined. Okay? That suddenly she becomes Abraham's wife, and she's now pregnant from him. Things that she never thought of. Maybe we don't know. And then she becomes abusive to Sarah because it gets to her mind. What is that? That's self-worship. That's a clear case that you begin to worship yourself. I'm so great. I'm so good. And you forget where you are. That's how it usually works. Then you fall in love with yourself. That's what it means to make a matzeva. That's what it means to make a monument. You make a monument, but to who? To yourself. So Sarah did something with it, right or wrong, we don't know, but she abused her. She abused her back. And from the verses you can see, it's even pshat, but the sages say this, and Rashi says this, that she miscarried. That she hurt her so bad, it's not clear if it was physical or psychological hurt, it's not clear, that Hagar lost her pregnancy. And then she ran away. And that's when we meet her, she's running away from Abraham and Sarah, and she's going into the wilderness. And then suddenly she sees an angel talking to her. So what does the angel say? The first thing he says is, Hagar, the maidservant of Sarai. What are you doing here? What's he saying, first of all? You forgot who you are. It's true that you are now, you were married to Avram, but you're still Sarai's maidservant. She never gave you up. So the first time the angel speaks, he puts her in her place. That's what we call submission, right? The first thing, you have to break the ego. You have to break this feeling of worshiping yourself. The second time the angel speaks, he says, go back to Sarah and accept your position. You should just accept that this is your lot in life. But then, the third time the angel speaks, he says, and you will be very fertile. You'll have many, many offspring. And still nothing happens. And then he speaks a fourth time and he says, and I'm here to tell you, behold, hinei atara, behold, you are pregnant right now, and you will give birth to a son, and he will be a great person. And then he also tells her in what way he's going to be great. He's going to be a wild ass, right? It's a whole thing. I can't remember right now. Yado bakol v'yad kol bo. He's going to be arguing with everybody. He's going to have a whole different mindset from the civilized world. It'll be different. So, what's going on here? What is she doing? She's doing what Abraham taught her to do. What did Abraham teach her? That every person has to fulfill themselves. To fulfill yourself means to have a relationship with Hashem. That's everything that we talked about in Faith and Confidence, that whole long series, which I think you heard. But the whole long series was about what? That Hashem gave you the power to envision who you want to be, and that's what you contribute to the world. It's like Hashem could have told you from the beginning, I'm going to tell you who you are. So we would have come with an instruction booklet, right? On this day you should do this, and this day you should do this, and this you should do this. It would still be a test, because you still have free choice, because you could decide not to follow the instruction book. And you say, I know better, I'll do it this way, I'll do that. It's not so clear that if each of us would come with an instruction book, we would follow it. A lot of us don't read the manuals, right? We just go ahead and put it together, and whatever comes out. So it's not so clear that would, but why didn't Hashem do that? Because He said, your contribution is creating yourself. Your contribution to the world is becoming the best possible version of yourself that you can. But it's up to you. And what am I going to say? What does Hashem say? And I'm going to follow you. Because you're going to decide what it is. And it's called, in the Talmud, it's called B'derech she'adam rotzeh leilech molichin oto. That in a path that a person wants to follow, in the heavens, they let him follow that path. They make sure that he's allowed to, whatever he wants, whatever path he wants. So what was Abraham's big chiddush? That he understood this. Noach didn't understand this, so he's just Eta Elokim itelech Noach. He's walking behind God. But Avram had Hashem say to him, "Hitalech lefanai ve'yatami," sincerity. So Hagar was in Abraham's household. She learned this. So you can see that the sages say, and it's pretty clear, that these 4 times that the angel speaks, they say it's not the same angel. It's different ones. Why? Because Hagar was like holding out. It's almost like she was haggling with Hashem. She's saying, it's not enough for me to go just back to Sarah. What else do you have to offer? So he says, I can offer you that you'll have many offspring. What else do you have to offer? That you're pregnant now. How could that possibly be? How could she be pregnant now? She just lost her pregnancy. So one way of possibly that this is how you would think about this is that she actually had twins. And only one of them miscarried. And the other one was still inside. She didn't know. So that was a tremendous revelation. But in any case, however it worked out, we say that that's not a very good way to do things. Why is that not good? Because you're forcing Hashem's hand. In what sense? That you want something. Okay. Meaning it's still self-worship. Even though you're coming and you're saying, Hashem, I need you. I need you for what? To fulfill what I need. And the concept of breaking the self-worship is the opposite. It's not what can you give me. It's what I can give you. In the sense of what can I give, the plan that you have for this world, what can I contribute to that? The moment that I think about things that way, that's breaking. That's an altar. I'm building an altar. An altar means that you're serving somewhere. You have some communication channel. But the question is, what is this altar serving? Is it serving Hashem? Are my plans, my vision of who I want to become, of what I want my life to be like, are those visions meant to serve Hashem, or are they meant to serve me? Right? The guy who says, Hashem, give me $1 million, so he's looking for his own benefit. He says, I need $1 million because I'm going to spend $1.5 million on doing this and that and this other mitzvah for you. So where's the other half going to come? Well, I'll get it from other places. Don't worry about it. That's how you come to somebody and you say, I'm working for you. That's what it means to work for someone. So it says that's service. So in wisdom, it means the psychological work that needs to be done in wisdom is to break the self-serving interests and to replace them with an altar for Hashem, to replace them with Hashem's interests. That's what wisdom does. Why do we say that it's from nothingness it comes? Because really that's what wisdom gives us. That in order to serve Hashem, I have to understand something that's beyond me. And it's connected very much to the crown. Sometimes even crown and wisdom interchange for some reasons. But the idea is that I can't define who I want to be just based on my schema of myself, just the way I understand myself. It has to go beyond that. I have to look at what is the world about. I have to go beyond myself. So that wisdom gives me. So you have to understand, everybody's religious in the sense that every person is religious, whether they say so or not.
Yeah.
Because maybe not everybody, but almost everybody who's productive is religious, because religion means I have a relationship with the future.
Yeah.
That's what Hashem is. Hashem is, the main thing of Hashem is He will be revealed. And even when we say Hashem's 4-letter name, right, the Hey Vav Hey just means now. And when you add the Yud, it will be. Hu Yihiyeh. Right, even sometimes in Isaiah it says, in Zechariah, V'yomo yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. And that day Hashem will be one and His name will be one. And it's explained that instead of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the way it is now, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, it'll be Yud Hey Yud Hey. Yeh means will be. And we see that when Moshe Rabbeinu came to the Jewish people in Egypt, he said, and they'll ask me, what is his name? What shall I tell them? What's his name? What's the name that he was taught? Remember? I will be what I will be. Yeah, asher yeah. Hashem is about what will be. So anybody who's thinking about the future is thinking about Hashem, whether they know it or not. It doesn't really matter whether you should be conscious, but everybody has this. Imagine that they used to not be this. People used to live their whole lives without thinking, what am I going to be when I grow up? Because you figured it out when you were 3 years old. My father was a farmer, so I'm a farmer. Or my father was a tailor, so I'm a tailor. There was no mobility. There was no asking the question of what will I be.
But if you're thinking in the future for your own self-interest, is that still considered religious?
So that's religious, but you're worshiping yourself. You're religious in the sense that you believe that there is a future, you believe that there is progress, you believe that there is change, but you're the God there. You're the one who decides on everything. You still decide on everything. What?
The modern times. I mean, that seems more the typical religion of today, no?
Right. That is what most religion is about today. It's very hard to break out of that. That's why I say you need wisdom. Because you need to shatter that monument that you've built to yourself. And you have to rebuild it as a monument to Hashem. Okay? And that's the question that the wisdom is asking constantly. What can I exchange for my self-interest? What else can I put there? So you need to eat, you need to sleep. You're not going to do any work if you can't eat, if you don't have a place to live. I mean, these things have to be part of it. But still, how do you know if you need, I don't know, 100 meters or 150 high, or maybe just 60, whatever it is? You have to ask, what am I doing? Is what I'm doing something that requires me to have all this? And if you gauge it that way constantly, based on what your goal is, then you understand what you need and what you don't need. And it's almost certain that Hashem will give you exactly what you need. Because again, in the heavens they say, in whatever path you want to follow, we'll let you follow.
Just
Yeah.
what you just said, sometimes I see people that are very good, or I don't want to say of course religious, but they have a thought and then it really, they don't have any money for it. But they, let's build this, or I'll do that, or I have to help Irgun or something, and then
It comes out of nowhere. Those are all the Reb Usher stories that we keep saying. You know, the Reb Usher needed 75,400 shekels, and suddenly somebody came out from the street. He brings him an envelope, and inside the exact amount that he needs. Why? Because he's working for Hashem. He's not working for himself. He doesn't live his life any other way. Now, this is especially, like we say, most of the problems that people have psychologically have to do with this. They start with not understanding the purpose of life, and therefore getting really stuck in their self-interests and not knowing how to fulfill them. And they don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel that they know what they're doing. There's no meaning to anything. and that starts, the avalanche pretty much of mental problems. The moment you begin to break this monument that you've built, it's made out of a lot of small self-interests, so you pull it made into a big altar. The moment you begin to break this and you change your mindset, then life begins to change also, and your mental state changes. That's what we always say, right? That the first advice, sort of like a charm, kind of a segula, for anybody that comes in is do something good for one person at least every day. You do at least one act of kindness. You do more. But the moment you're doing something for somebody else, everything changes. Everything begins to change. Okay. So this is wisdom. I'm trying this time not to go overboard with each one of them. Oh, I mentioned the Torah before. I still want to say one more word about it. That if the person is someone who can learn, so a lot of times even learning is the rectification of wisdom. Not, it can't be by itself, but it's the revealed part of wisdom that you also have to learn. If you're not learning, then wisdom finds it hard to fix itself. Okay. So now we come to Bina, to understanding. And this one's easy, right? What is the verse that talks about Bina and Avoda and service? So that's Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. That serve God joyously or joyfully. Because Bina is joy, right? So that's a simple connection. How do you do this? Well, the simple thing is the person has to have more joy, right? As I was coming here, so there's a woman who studied by us in the second year that we taught Torah Nefesh. It was back in Kfar Chabad at the time. His name is Miri Schneerson. You ever hear her on the radio? She has a show, I don't know what days, but she has a show like 11 to 12, I think, or something like that. On what's it called?
What's the show on?
I'm
sure it's in Hebrew.
It's like Poke of Variety. I don't know. It's like it's a variety show. It's like all these. She talks about different views. So it's on the 92.8. What is that called?
Don't ask me.
Oh, you don't hear Hebrew radio.
Right.
What a shame.
Oh, I see.
It's Kol Chai, whatever it's called. Yeah, Kol Chai. So she was talking to some woman. Oh, look at that.
She's listening to you.
So she was talking to some woman.
Yeah. Feedback.
Yeah, you can just close the app. The way you close an app usually. Even if you go to something else, it'll probably stop. Maybe it won't because it's Zoom. Yeah? Okay. So she was interviewing some woman. No. Okay, can I do it?
How do I do this?
Even though it's Android, and they have a real problem with Android. I think you do this.
The old people just aren't with it.
There you go. Okay. So, it's not so important, but she was interviewing somebody from Kupat Cholim Klalit and talking about prevention of, I'm guessing that it had to do with some disease. And in the end she said, but the most important thing, the woman from Kupat Cholim Klalit, the most important thing is that if you want to prevent diseases, any kind of illnesses, you have to be joyful all the time. She quoted a pasuk from Mishlei that I made a mental note to reconstruct, but it's a great pasuk. I didn't remember it. It says that if you have joy in your life, then your body functions well.
And this is on the radio.
It was on the radio just as I was coming here.
Could be better.
So how do you bring joy into... This is the Bina. This is rectifying the work that needs to be done. So the main thing is music. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. What is it referring to? Again, the source of everything we're saying is that avoda. Maybe we didn't mention this enough, but the first verse we said, ve'avada leivihu, that the Levite will serve he. That all avoda, all hard work, which axis does it belong to? The right, the left, or the center? What do you say? Which one is tough and persevering?
Well, that's Gevurah.
Yeah, it's all Gvura. All work, hard work is Gvura. It's all the left axis. And the Levi is always on the left. The Levi is a man of Gvurot. He's a man of might. We see Levi and Shimon went together to avenge their sister. But the Kohen, he's an Isha Chesed. He's a man of loving kindness, so he's the right axis. And the scholar, he's in Torah, right? So we have that the world stands on three pillars. What are the three pillars? Torah is the center axis, Avoda is the left axis, and Gmilut Chasadim, act of loving kindness, which is the right axis. It's like loving kindness, Chesed. So all the work we're talking about is the left axis. So here in this case, what is the Levi who's on the left? What kind of joy does he bring? That's the key to understanding Yivdu et Hashem b'simcha. What do the Levites do? So you see, they are the gatekeepers. They open and close the gates in the tabernacle and in the temple. But they also do something more. It's more even, that's what they're known for. They're musicians. They sing. They make it possible. They add inspiration. They add power to the Kohen, who's a man of Chesed, who's very gentle. They're very quick, the Kohanim, but they're also very gentle. It says that they work quietly. They work b'chashai. That's how the Gemara calls it. Chashai means both quietly and with a lot of sensitivity. Like chush. You're sensitive to something. You have a sense about something. So that's how they served. But the Levites, they're very like music. The moment you put music into the story, so it's not so gentle anymore. It depends what kind of music. We'll talk about that in a second. But the moment that you add music, that's what added the joy. That's what added the simcha into the service in the temple. That's what made the Kohanim much stronger in their work, much more takifim. Like I give you understand takif, the person who has a lot of stamina to do what they do. The music keeps you going. So the music is a source of joy, and we know there's two different types of nigunim, two different types of music in general. There's the simcha and there's gaguim. The simcha and yearning, right? We don't say, people say it's sad music. It's not sad music. If it's real music, it awakens yearning. It's not meant to make you sad. Maybe if you think about something and you can't have it, maybe it makes you sad. But the point of a nigun, of a good nigun, is to awaken you to something. So either it awakens you with joy, or it awakens you with a gaguim. So what would, going back to the crown, if somebody doesn't have, his crown is not working, he's not seeking. So the type of music that awakens your ability to seek, to look, to search, to find that which is hidden, that is the nigunei gaguim, the music like yearning. Right? Everything that people call sad, but in Chassid, right, melancholy. It's not melancholy. It awakens feelings. And feelings, if it's a good nigun, it awakens feeling of I want to move somewhere. I want to go somewhere. I'm looking for something. I'm searching for something. I don't even know maybe what it is, but I'm searching for it. But here we're talking about the joyful music. And the joyful music is the simcha. Yivdu et Hashem b'simcha. It's also the Levi. And what is it called in the Torah? It's called avodat avodah. It's a very interesting phrase. There's many, it's such an interesting phrase. There's a lot of books that were called avodat avodah. Everybody loves this phrase, apparently. This is probably the phrase that has, I think, the most books. The Tanzer Rebbe, his series of Sfarim are called avodat avodah. And the Tasha Rebbe, his series of Sfarim are called avodat avodah. And a very good friend of mine, who's a tremendous Talmud Chacham, he has on the whole Shas a series of books called avodat avodah. Everybody loves this. The work of the work. What does that mean? Yeah. Not of the worker. The work of the work. Avodat avodah. So it's a very strange concept. But here you understand what it means. The sages say it's called avodat avodah. The Torah calls the work of the Levites that is singing avodat avodah because it's the work that accompanies work. That's how you have to understand it. It's the work that allows other work to happen. And think about, I don't know how you were in high school or in college, but when I was in college, I remember there was a particular tape, it was tapes back then, that I heard probably, 30, 40 times a day. I don't know if there's enough hours in the day. But every time I had to prepare for a test or I did homework, whatever it was, I just heard it again and again and again and again. So why do people hear music in the background? Because apparently it facilitates working. It helps you work. So now people don't do that anymore. They go on to YouTube and then there's, focused music or music for focus and this, and you put this in the background and that's how you work. So that's avodat avodah. That's work that leads to more work. That's the purpose of joy. Joy is not a product and it's not a goal in and of itself. Joy is meant to facilitate everything else. Okay? That's what brings about. So when a person doesn't have inner joy, bina come out of understanding, the mother principle. It's like it gives birth. So that's the advice. And it's also a segula. You see right away that you could say to somebody, look, you have to increase the joy in your life. And increasing joy in your life means adding fuel to the fire so that you can do what you need to do. You have to be, but if you need to create it, if you don't have it, what can I do? So the segula, the charm, the idea is that your house has to be filled with music. And so if you don't play music yourself, so you put it on, thank God we have a solution today. In the past it was very difficult, it's true. But now there's no reason not to. And so you buy the right music and you put it on and everything seems different. It changes the whole atmosphere. So that's called avodat avodah. That's fixing the bina.
I heard just a little question. I was wondering with all the choices of music, could it be that I'm thinking, like some of the music you hear today, I think even though it's music, it can put out something very bad, right?
Reb Nachman has a whole Torah on this. And he says, Asur lishma nigun mimnagen rasha. He says, you shouldn't hear music from a wicked musician. So sometimes they're not wicked in and of themselves, but again, you have to ask the question of if it's facilitating something, what is it facilitating? What is it trying to form? Where is the focus? Okay. I guess it's a question of age, but now when I try to hear the music that I listened to when I was 16 or 17 or 18, it doesn't sound right. Something is off. And it's like it's driving me, but it's driving into not so good places. Okay. So now we come to dat. And that is very interesting. Because I wouldn't think of this. I wouldn't think of this. So here he goes back to the first time that the word avoda appears in the Torah. So every time that there's a word and we want to understand its meaning, so we learn from the Gemara that wherever a letter first appears, that word in which it first appears defines that letter. So where do they learn this? They show us usually just one example, and the others you have to figure out by yourself. So the example they give is a tet. So the letter tet, can say where's the first place that it shows up in the Chumash, in the Torah? Vayar Elokim et ha'or ki tov, that it was good. God saw that the light was good. So from this they learn that tet is related to goodness. And not just that, they say, then they darshan it, and they say that what does the tet look like? It's very interesting. What's the tet? What is it a picture of?
It flows, in a sense.
Okay. But if you look at a tet in the Sefer Torah, it looks like a serpent. It has a head. I'll try to do it from here. You're looking at me. It has a head, and then it curls around, and then its tail. Right? When I was young, I could never remember which way the little thing goes in on the tet is. It is on the right or on the left. So the easy way to remember is that it looks like a snake who's curled up. So his tail curls into himself. Very strange pictograph to use for something that signifies good. Where they come up with this thing? Where'd they get it from? Right? It's a very strange idea. So the sages said, Tovei ganiz begavei, that its goodness is concealed within it. That even the Yetzer Hara, even that which is negative, has some goodness inside of it. And so you have to learn how to unlock it. You have to learn how to get into the interior.
But isn't that connected? I mean, in Yad Sarah, they use the snake because it replenishes itself.
Right.
So it's maybe the same. Yeah.
Yesterday we heard something that was mind-blowing as usual from... No, not this time it was... Rabbi Ginsburgh gave a half hour that they showed yesterday in one of his grandson's bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah was yesterday. So he gave a new meaning to what it means. Orod de'tov bekilim de'tikun. The Rebbe said that the formula for bringing Mashiach is lights of chaos, but in rectified vessels. So lights of chaos, it says everywhere. Everybody knows what it is. It's Esav. Esav represents the lights of chaos, the world of chaos, the world that shattered and fell. Why did it shatter? Because it was all self-interest. It was all ego. Esav is the only person in the world that talks to himself in the Bible. Everybody else talks to their heart, but Esav talks to himself. It's a well-known thing that the sages say, that the Areshayim birshut libam, that the wicked they're captive in the hands of their heart. They can't control their hearts, and the righteous, they control their hearts. And they bring the example that Esav says, "Vayomar Esav belibo." Esav said in his heart. He's talking to himself. Solomon said, "Amarti el libi." I said to my heart, meaning I control my heart. I tell it what to feel. I tell it how to behave. But Esav, he's in his heart. He can't escape. He's stuck there. So, orot de'tov, lights of chaos, that's like Esav, that a person is serving himself. What does it then mean that you put into rectified vessels? So there's all kinds of explanations that were given over the years. We had a whole course on this, right? Remember? We gave 11 different examples of the Baal Shem Tov's paradoxes. They all had to do with lights of chaos and rectified vessels. It was a whole semester that we learned. But yesterday you said something amazing. You said, in the end, Esav is my evil inclination. In each one of us, Esav is our evil inclination. It's our Yetzer Hara. What do you need to do with the Yetzer Hara? So usually we just say you have to vanquish it. You have to think something that we sort of know inside, but it's very scary. It's that the Mashiach will come when we learn how to take and to put it into rectified vessels. Meaning that there's really no contradiction. It's just that the Yetzer Hara by itself is out of context. If you only have a Yetzer Hara and you don't put it into the right context, then it really becomes self-serving and becomes something terrible. But if you are able to take the Yetzer Hara and you're able to put it into your rectified vessels. Rectified vessels means a rectified way of thinking, understanding what my life is about, what I'm here to do, what is good, what does it mean to help others, all these things. If I can take those powers that I have, that energy that I have in my Yetzer Hara, and bring it into my rectified way of being, then that is the Mashiach. That's the Mashiach in each one of us. So who's the spark of Mashiach, it turns out? The Esav in me. He's just waiting to get into the right fireplace. But that spark needs to ignite something. The question is what? So normally it ignites just my self-serving interests. But if I can bring him to ignite my care for others. I heard something from Rosh Steinsaltz. I just heard it yesterday. He said once, somebody asked him, how is it possible that somebody who started out, his parents were communists, and he didn't go to religion.
Parents for what?
Communists, real communists, real honest to goodness. And he was completely non-religious. And at age 14, he decided to become a Baal Tshuva, and then eventually became Rosh Steinsaltz. So somebody asked him, how is it even possible that this happened? What was it? So the answer was, I guess there are people who have so much taiva, who have so much craving, that this world is not enough for them. They want the next world also. I thought that was a great explanation of what it means. That only the Yetzer Hara has so much taiva that you wouldn't be content with this life. That's an interesting way to see it. If you only want this life, so work on a bigger house, work on a better car, work on this world. That's this world. But if you're not, you see this world and you say, nothing in this world can really satisfy me. I need much more. So then you end up in Torah, because Torah is more than this world. Yeah? So it's a very interesting way of seeing that. Yeah? That you can take that craving that the Yetzer Hara has, and if you put it into the right context, then suddenly you can achieve much more than you could if you were just, right? What did tzaddikim usually look like?
Usually we think of slouching, suddenly.
So that's called tuvei ganiz b'gavei. That's what it means, that its goodness is inside it. You just have to crack it open. You have to figure out how to open it up and use it in the right way. And that was the serpent also. If they would have understood how to use the serpent, says the Zohar, then he would have been the biggest helper. But they didn't understand what to do with him. He's telling you should be like God. He was telling them the biggest secret, which is later David HaMelech says exactly the same thing. He says, Ani amarti Elokim atem, uvnei elyon kulchem. I said, says Hashem, that you are gods, and you are all the sons of the Most High. Achen ke'adam timutun u'chachad asarim tipolu. But indeed, you died like humans, and you became like one of the ministers. You fell and you didn't understand what the serpent was telling you. What was it telling you? That if you eat from this, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. So it's exactly what God wanted. He just didn't want you to eat from it first. He said, first eat from the tree of life. First know where Torah is taking you. And then once you know Torah, then you can add the tree of knowledge, even self-knowledge. Even we talked about that a lot, right? That David says to Shlomo, Da'at Elokei Avicha ve'ovdeu. Know God and then serve Him. So what does he mean? If you know God, then you can engage even with your evil inclination, because your whole purpose is to increase godliness in the world. So this is dangerous because it's Esav, it's a Hod Dato, it's chaotic lights. So there has to be very wide vessels, very strong vessels to contain the amount of energy that this has. So why would we say all this? Because that was just to explain the principle that you look at the first time a letter appears to understand the words. Now that's extended in later. And so we say that every time the word first appears in the Torah, that's the meaning of that word, or that's the essence of that word. So the first time that the word avoda appears is Vayikach et ha'adam. At the beginning of chapter 2 it says Va'adam ein la'avod et ha'adama. And that there was no man yet to toil, to till, to work the earth. And then Hashem planted a garden in Eden, and He created man, and He put the man in the garden. And eventually, what happens? Why did He put him in the? He put him in the garden and says, "Lo v'da'u l'shamam," to work it, because that's what He said. There's no man to work. And then at the end, when they're cast out of Eden, then it says, La'avod et ha'adama, same phrase, to work the earth, ki misham lukachta, because that is where you were taken from. So when they're cast out of it, they were supposed to do it in the Garden of Eden, but they ended up having to do it after having been taken out, thrown out. There's an interesting gematria here that he said. It's so interesting, I should probably repeat it. La'avod et ha'adama, again, this is the first phrase that work appears, equals 562. Now, if you don't know what 562 is, it's not very revealing with 562 is the value of tzionut. Zionism is la'avod et ha'adama.
Wow.
It almost captures in one word, like in one phrase, the essence of what Zionism was about. It's a very interesting thing.
Can you
There's
say
a-
the phrase again?
La'avod et ha'adama, to work the earth.
Okay, so wait a minute, you said this phrase twice. But you said it,
It appears twice. Once before
and that's
the Garden of Eden was planted, and once they're thrown out of the Garden of Eden, he's sent from the Garden of Eden to work the earth from which he was taken. The same phrase.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's just saying that this phrase appears twice.
Okay. All right.
So how do we understand this? What does this phrase want to tell us? In general, working the earth is a negative thing in the Torah. It's not considered a positive thing.
Even in Eretz Israel,
Yeah,
like when it was planted.
it's very interesting. So the sages say it like this: Shlosha hayu lehutim achar avodat ha'adama. That there were three who were craving to work the earth. It's like working the earth is not so. It's not as romantic as it sounds. You have to be careful. Why? Because it's an understanding that you're too gashmiistic. You're too connected to physicality. That's exactly what I mean by tionut. That's exactly the problem. Who was the first person to work the earth?
Is it Cain?
Cain. And what do we see what happened from that? Didn't turn out too well. Meaning Adam didn't. He was thrown out and he never pursued what he was supposed to do, and his son did. So that's a good case. The son's a Baal Tshuva. Really Cain was a Baal Tshuva. Because he knew what had happened, and he knew that his father and mother were taken out of Eden in order to, out of the garden in order to work the earth, and they didn't. So he did. But he was too into it. There was not enough time left for spirituality, because man is both things. You're duality. You have a spiritual soul and you have a physical body. So if you're too encumbered by your physicality and all you think about all day long is the earth, and the earth is very strong, because as an example that one of the students once said that if you learn Torah, it takes a long time until you begin to have dreams of Torah. Even if you learn all day long, it can take years until you begin to dream Torah in your dream. But if you go onto a farm and you just spend one day working the earth, you will almost you're guaranteed almost to dream about it at night, right away. It leaves a tremendous impression on you. And so he says it's a double-edged sword, this ground. I mean, you need it, because otherwise you're not a human being. And there can be holiness in it. But the holiness is there only if you also have a spiritual side. If you don't have a spiritual side, it by itself can cause you actually the opposite. So the first example is Cain. Who's the second example? Noach. Noach came out of the ark, and he planted a vineyard, and he grew wine, and he made wine and got drunk, and then happened what happened. Who's the third one, who was also lahut achar avodat ha'adama? It says Uziyahu. Uziyahu was the king who's one of the greatest kings that there was. He was also very righteous. But it says, Vayiven Uziyahu migdalim vayechazkem. And he built Yerushalayim, and he built many towers or keeps. And he strengthened them a lot. And as much as he was spiritual, he was also very bent on building. He was the original Zionist, you could say. That out of everybody amongst the kings of Israel, he was the one who really loved the land of Israel. Like there was no one like him. But the sages say that what happened? He loved it so much that it did something to him. He lost his connection above. And the result of that was that he decided that he would be a high priest. That he decided that he was everything already. It gives you a lot of satisfaction when you build something, when you're able to successfully build in land of, especially in land of Israel, which is very hard. It's very hard to build here. Everything here is, especially around Yerushalayim, Yudav Shomron, there's no topsoil. You just begin to do anything, and you're hitting hard rock. Okay, so everything here is like you go to, why can they build in Gaza in 2 weeks? They can build a whole subway system because it's all soft, it's all sand, it's very easy. But here, you want to build something, it's the biggest. So somebody who's successful in building in this was Eretz Yisrael, then they get a lot of hubris from it. Tremendous. So much he got that he decided he would be the high priest. And so he went into the Holy of Holies and he wanted to bring a Ktoret. He wanted to bring the incense. And the moment that he put the fire on the incense and started filling, he had tzarat. Suddenly he had leprosy on his forehead. And then he was like dead because mitzurah chashuv kamet. He's tameh. He can't do anything. So they rushed him out of the temple. And he spent the rest in a closed building. He never came out again. And his son Yotam, which is why Yotam is considered to be the most righteous of all the kings of Judah. Yeah, he was too down to the earth. So his son Yotam is considered to be the greatest of the righteous kings, so much that Rashbi said, I by myself could pater, I could release the world from the midas adin, from judgment, from the time it was created, right now. And if I add my son Elazar to me, then we can cancel all the din that was from the beginning of the world until now. And if we add Yotam ben Uziyahu, if we add this king, Yotam, the son of Uziyahu, then we can cancel the din from now until the coming of Mashiach. So it's a statement that's trying to say that I, Rashbi, am in the present. My son, Elazar, he's about the past. And Yotam ben Uziyahu, he's about the future. And each one of us has a different type of righteousness. All the symbology that needs to be understood. So it's an interesting topic in Chassidus, this whole thing. But we said all this because to work the land is not always such a positive thing, because those who are too engrossed in it, they end up sinning. They end up ruining things. In fact, it says that the earth punished Uziyahu. How did it punish him? That was the moment that he had the leprosy was the moment that there was a big earthquake. There was a big earthquake in his time. They say that's the earthquake that Isaiah starts his book with. Vayanu amot hasipim. The first nevuah that Isaiah has is not the one in chapter 1, but the one in chapter 6 in Isaiah. And there he describes his first nevuah. He was a young man. And according to most of the commentaries, this was the moment that Uziyahu tried to bring the incense. And so there was a tremendous earthquake, and everything seemed to be falling. And that was the moment that Isaiah had his first vision of the chariot. And then in chapter 6, he says what he saw. So these things don't end too well, usually. Why don't they end too well? So we already mentioned it, because the earth has a tremendous impact on a person's consciousness. The earth, how do you say earth in Hebrew? Adama. So there's, Adama. What does that word mean? Almost. The mama is also related to it. So usually we say dam, Adam, Adama. There's like blood. And then there's Adam, man, and Adama, earth. But they all come from the same Dalid Mem. This is true about the blood, it's true about man, it's true about the earth. They all represent what we call representation. Dimui. Like bidmut, the image. They're all about images. Why? Because Adama especially is related to what we call Adameh, the power of imagination. That's why it has such a strong impact. So, la'avod et ha'adama, he explains here, and I think we'll end with this because we're already into an hour, even with all the delays in the beginning, that to work the land, meaning to work the soil, is to fix in our psyche the power of imagination. And that's dat. And we'll talk about why consciousness next time. I wanted to finish 3, but we finished 2.5 or 2 1/4. So next time we'll talk about dat defined as imagination here. And we'll see why. Because usually we say that imagination is the external aspect of bina, of understanding. And here we're saying that it's dat. And the reason is that really when we say that it's the external aspect of bina, we mean that bina has an ability to rectify the imagination. But the imagination is in dat. So we need to expand it a little bit. But we'll just say the gematria that Reb Nachman brings. Reb Nachman brings a beautiful gematria about koach hamedameh. With koach hamedameh, the power of imagination. He says it's equal to egel hazahav. He says that what they worshipped is an imagination, an imaginary vision of God that they had. That was the golden calf. So he says in general, what leads us to all the sins in the world starts from the imagination. And that's something the sages say. They say that ha-lev chomed, first the heart covets. That's why he says in 10 Commandments, don't covet. First of all, don't covet. That's the source of everything. If you don't covet anything, then imagine whatever you want. Then the psyche wants, and it says who's in between them? Who's the one who brings them together? This is the power of imagination is the salsul, it's called. He's the one he's like the go-between. And so the power of imagination takes what the heart covets, and it teaches the mind how to want it. And that's how also the Rambam explains the whole process. That if you need to, so someone could say, but I have other things in my heart. I want Hashem, for instance. I want spiritual things. So I need my power of imagination. Otherwise, my mind won't want it. So you need to fix the power of imagination. You can't do without it. You can't throw it out. But you have to fix it. Yeah, it's there and it's useful. It's very useful. And in fact, all of prophecy is an imagination, as it were. Okay? The whole difference between all the other prophets and Moshe Rabbeinu is that all the other prophets, their power of imagination is not completely rectified. So that's why they say, Ko amar Hashem. This is about what Hashem said, approximately. We don't know exactly. We can't know exactly because my power of imagination, it's not that they didn't see what Hashem was telling them. It's that they know that their power of imagination is not yet completely rectified. So they can't say 100% this is what Hashem meant. They know what he said, but they don't know exactly what he meant because they can't imagine perfectly right. But Moshe Rabbeinu, his power of imagination is perfect. Let's finish just with one example. How do we see the Moshe Rabbeinu's, apart from the fact that his prophecy is different? It says by the other prophets, Biyad Nevi'im Adameh, that in the hands of the prophets I will be imagined. Only imagined. But by Moshe Rabbeinu it's panim el panim, it's face to face. There's no imagination there. Mar'eh velo bechidot. A vision and not a riddle. But how do you see it in that same place where God says that Moshe Rabbeinu is different from every other prophet, especially you, Miriam, and you, Aaron? What's the sign that Moshe Rabbeinu was different than them? It's in that parsha itself. Remember, they were talking about him. Miriam was saying, how is it that he left his wife? And we too are prophets, and we also prophesize. We didn't leave our spouses. So what about him? So it's very easy to see that Moshe was there. Okay, we talked about this in the past. He was there. He was listening. And that's why the Torah says, "Vayish Moshe anav mikol adam asher pnei adama." The Moshe Rabbeinu was more humble than every man on the face of the earth. How do you know this? From the fact that he was there. Because he didn't say anything. He heard them speaking about him. And what was his reply? He's not upset. And he's not angry at them. And he doesn't feel a need to, to defend himself. And to say, Hashem told me or Hashem didn't tell me. None of these things. Why? Because his power of imagination is rectified. he doesn't imagine for a second that they're saying it to hurt him. Because that's where all the problems start. Now, who said that when somebody is saying something about you, you have to understand that they want to hurt me? Maybe they're thinking good things about me. Okay? If somebody criticizes me, does that mean that they don't like me? Does it mean maybe they really care for me? So the Rebbe Rayatz used to say, "Ehov et habikoret," love criticism, ki ta'amid otcha al hagova amiti, because it will raise you to your real stature. But that only works.
It's an opportunity.
Again, if you think about it as the other person has my best interest in mind, he's not here to hurt me. But if you begin to imagine things, so then you get into trouble. So this is very much related to to da'at, which is how I perceive my place in the world. Am I in a good place or not in a bad place? This all has to do with how I use my power of imagination. So we'll finish it Bezrat Hashem next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
We're been,
Oh,
been
yeah.
done. You don't have to.
No, it's okay.
Even though we have a nefesh Eloki, everybody, we're all more artsy than ruchni, right? Like it was true in Gan Eden, and it's still true today.
That by nature, yes.
By
Right,
nature definition,
right.
that's what we are.
Right.
So that's our struggle.
Right.
That's our work.
Right. To make it at least more balanced.
At least more balanced.
You can do it more than that, but yeah.
Right. Or have perspective on it.
Right,
And
right.
work with it.
Right.
I don't get the link, but I guess you're going to do that next week.
We'll do more. Yeah. There's lots of-
But are you saying that like the whole thing is how we perceive ourselves? That's the beginning of
Right.
rectifying that.
Right. That how I see myself has a lot to do with how I imagine, how my power of imagination, word in Hebrew is metavech, how it presents things to me. And if a person has a positive power of imagination, then even things that you could take as negative can suddenly become positive. Oh, I had a flat. So the negative power of imagination is, it's going to ruin my day because I'm going to be late for this. And the positive power of imagination is, and somebody would say, but this is not realistic, is that I was just saved from I don't know what. And it's a good thing that I'm coming late. And it's there. And again, it's just how you imagine your life to be. Is your life, I think, the way this was captured in, I think already a crazy way, but it was captured and it was described in a very interesting way. Is there was a movie called Nadol Shavita, The Beautiful Life,
Oh, I saw that.
and the Holocaust. You saw it?
That's a crazy
Yes,
movie.
It's crazy, but it works.
It's great.
I mean, it's going beyond already, but you get the idea, because you can live that way, and when you live that way, life can be something different.
But that's
And it's-
rectified?
No, so that's already out of this world. But in terms of how to take,
Meaning, isn't rectified the truth? You're perceiving the truth, no? You're saying what's the truth?
it's hard to
So
say.
you're perceiving
Hard to say.
Hashem. If you're
But the
finding
truth is,
Hashem-
first of all, that you shouldn't be upset by it. Whatever somebody is saying about it, you shouldn't be upset by it. That's the first principle of the Baal Shem Tov. You should have equanimity. Whether they say good things about you, bad things about you, this is all serving Hashem. It doesn't matter. Everything's an opportunity. It all depends on how you're going to look at it. The truth is that I need to serve Hashem. I don't, the word truth in English is something about whether something is true or false. But in Hebrew, true doesn't mean that. True means in Hebrew, fulfillment. We know that from we've talked about that many times. The first Rashi in Va'era, Uvishmi avaya lo nodati lehem, that I didn't reveal my name Yud Kei Vav Kei to the patriarchs. And Rashi says, what does it mean that they knew the name Havaya? Of course they knew it. No, I didn't reveal my measure of truth to them. What does it mean I didn't reveal my measure of truth? He says that I made many promises and I didn't fulfill them. So truth in the philosophical, in the what we call the epistemological sense, is very interesting. It's an interesting concept. It's a Greek concept. It's not the way the Yiddishkeit normally sees it. It's not that it's wrong. It's not wrong to say that it's true, because 1 + 1 is not equal to 3, right? That's not true. But that's an adjunct meaning. It just means that if you do 1 + 1 = 3, it will not be very fulfilling. Maybe it's fulfilling for your bank account, but it's not fulfilling for your mind. It just doesn't sit well. There's something wrong with it. Okay, so we'll talk more about this, God willing, next week.
Avi had a question
Oh.
about the word consciousness.
Yes.
Last week you said what it was in Hebrew.
Muda'ut, or I think last week we used hakara, because we were talking about keter, that the two-letter root of keter is kaf resh, and that's also the two-letter root of hakara. But this is a modern word.
Okay.
In the Bible, hakara means to know someone.
Okay.
It's used as a verb, not as a noun. So it's not that it's far-fetched. Modern Hebrew is based on the biblical Hebrew, but it's a development.
Okay.
And there we saw it in terms of Ruth, that she didn't know herself. She didn't have knowledge of what she could become, the mother of the kingdom. And that Boaz looked at her, and he saw that she was something special, and she says, why do you know me, or why did you become Madua takireni? Lama ze takireni v'anochi nochriya? Foreigner. And we said that foreigner means also that she's foreign to herself. She doesn't know what's in her crown. She doesn't know what's in her superconsciousness. She doesn't know what her potential is. It's almost it's like Boaz brought her out of that state of not wanting to be more, not yearning for more. We said the problem with the crown is, that's what we said last week.
Right.
That you have to search for your hidden self. You have to search for Hashem. You have to search. You have to feel that there's more to it than what I see right now. Okay.
I hope Avi heard that.
I don't
Is Avi
know.
there?
She's not here, so
Okay, I'll tell him.
okay.
She's maybe gonna come.
And
She
What?
didn't come? She didn't come?
She just left some
Thank you
message
so
about
much.
if you want to
pleasure.
That was
get
totally
together
right.
with her afterwards.
Yeah, we do this every week.
No, I wanted to get together with her before I came.
Oh, okay.
I'm running to the bathroom. I'm gonna give you a
Okay.
You were on fire today.
I had the same
Did you
thought.
have a cup of coffee today?
No. I don't drink coffee anymore, unfortunately.
I think you put two.
Tonight,